to the WRAC Talks, an important conversation hosted by the Warner Robins Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, where the president is Danielle Little. Today, we will provide voter education. We will talk about who can vote, how to register to vote, how to find out your voter status. We will also tell you about ways to vote and what's required in order for you to vote. We have with us a special guest who will bring information in the voting process. She will talk about absentee voting, and she will also discuss the process of obtaining a ballot and how to complete an application. We welcome today Mrs. Vanika Miller. We also have our very own Diana Vining, who is the co-chair of our hospitality committee. She will provide information about what you need in order to get into the door. She wants to ensure that your voice is heard, because when we all vote, it makes a difference. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Awesome. So as we get started into this voter education process, which is the season, we're entering into that time where we go and we submit our ballots. And we know that there's a lot of conversation that's going on right now behind the absentee ballot about how to get a ballot, and just even will that ballot matter, because they have conversations about the postal service and things of that nature. So as we go into that, I just kind of want to give a little background about the previous numbers in Houston County when we had our presidential election earlier this year. There were about 100,000 persons who voted in that election. There were about 30,000 persons who actually voted by absentee ballot. What do you all think about that? Is that something that's alarming to you?
No, it's not alarming. I think given the state of COVID-19, people wanted a safe way to cast their ballots and to select their presidential their candidate for the presidential primary. So no, I don't think it was alarming. I do believe that it was overwhelming for our local Board of Elections office. There were several changes that occurred this year during the primary season.
Are some of those changes? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say I agree totally with Ms. Miller. Absentee voting, especially with the COVID-19 that's going on right now, it's a perfect opportunity to be used. And I remember when I was in the military, even though I was traveling overseas, I used absentee ballot to vote in every election. So I think it's a great thing to be able to use it now.
You're absolutely correct, both of you. I want to come to Mrs. Vining and speak to that, and then I want to come back to Mrs. Miller and talk about some of those changes, if we need to know them and how they may have impacted the process. But Mrs. Vining, when you were in the military, that was something that was kind of pushed. You heard about absentee voting for military personnel and for those persons who were over a certain age. And that was the only time you heard about it in the community. So what we're saying now is there's a shift that is not just about age or military because you've been deployed. That is something that's afforded to everyone. And that's perhaps something that many people weren't aware of. What do you think?
I agree, because I know I never thought that you could absentee ballot if you were actually in the county. I always assumed if you were out of state, in the military, or away at school, then there was an opportunity for you to absentee vote. So this has been an eye-opener for myself to know that it doesn't matter, that I have just as much opportunity to vote absentee here in my house or if I was in the military overseas. So I think it's great.
Absolutely. And it's my understanding that the state of Georgia received a gold standard behind, years ago when they put that in place. I think it was called a trifecta process that they put in place with the absentee voting, and making it that you didn't even have to have an excuse. There was no requirement or no prerequisite to even obtain an absentee ballot. And that perhaps more information that many of the people in our area, and probably, this state, that didn't know that you don't need a reason, to do that.
Right. Correct.
Ms. Miller, going back to what you talked about with the changes that were made down in the office of voter regulation, for lack of my word to flow right now in this moment. Were those changes something that we needed to know? Will it make a difference in how this process moves forward?
So yes, one, it wasn't necessarily changes. We do have a new Board of Elections supervisor, but speaking specifically to the electoral changes this year, if you recall, we received new voting machines, and that was a completely new process for our community and for voters. So staff members had to get trained on how to use that equipment. And then there were several community engagement events where voters also had to get trained on using that equipment, because we wanted to have an actual paper ballot where we could track our votes and how we voted. And so then on top of that change, which was a new process, then COVID hit. And then people began to raise more awareness that you don't, in fact, need a reason to vote absentee.
Okay, very good. So we've kind of just gotten into that process of the history of where we are now with the absentee voting. So I want to just very quickly talk about who can register to vote. We know that you have to be 18 to vote, but that you can actually register at 17 and a half. But just on that voting date, you have to be 18. And we also know that people, there's that back and forth about whether or not you're on parole or probation, or you're still serving some type of sentence, what that looks like. And we tell people all the time, if that sentence has been completed, if you served the probation, paid the fines, dealt with the reporting, then you are free and clear to go and register to vote. Mm-hmm. Are you all still seeing where that's a conversation that continuously need to be had amongst particularly the Black and Brown communities? Are you running into those conversations?
Yes, I do run into those conversations quite frequently through our direct voter contact, where we initially this year, we began canvassing early in our low propensity, hard to count precincts and low voter turnout precincts. That is still a misnomer. A lot of people don't know that if what we call it is off papers. So if you're off papers, off probation and off parole, that you absolutely can, get registered again and vote. But that is still something that is a pervasive issue or within our community, where people just don't know that they can. And I think a lot of that is intentional. It has been intentionally communicated that if you are a felon, if you've done if you've had a background, then you lose your voting rights permanently. And that is just not the case.
Absolutely. Mrs. Biden, what do you think about that?
Well, I was thinking that I remember being at a meeting, I think it may have been a couple of months ago, and there was a young man there, and that was one of his questions that he asked. He said that he had been told that he would not be able to vote because of something that he had done in his past. And it was at an NAACP meeting, actually. And there was someone there that was able to stand up and tell him, yes, you can vote. And they were telling him how he could do it, where to go to get the information that he needed. So people are still being told today that they can't vote. And I think it's up to us to make sure that people know that they can vote and how they can vote.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a couple other things when it comes to that registering to vote that kind of concerns me, because some people have been told that they have to pick a party in order to vote. And we know that that's not true in every type of election, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So you don't have to pick a political party to vote in the state's regular general election. But people think, well, if I vote this way, a misunderstanding is if I vote this way, this go round, I have to vote this way forever. Right. So do y'all want to speak to that? That's one of those things I think that really pigeonholes the Black and Brown community.
It does. And I remember growing up, I grew up with my grandparents, and that was something that they told me. We made sure we voted, but you always have to vote the same party all the time, regardless of when you vote. And of course, as I grew up and moved and found out more information, I realized that wasn't the case. So it is something that's being told, especially by older generations to us, that you have to do that. But we're learning now as we dive into more information and as we have these type of forums like we're having right now, that that's not the case. So.
Ms. Miller, you had any additional thoughts to that?
No, I agree. It can be confusing, particularly when you are reintroducing vote by mail, and that question is still on there. You know, it doesn't change on the form from the primary to the general election, and so people still get in their heads that I have to pick a party when I get ready to vote in the general. So it's just as Ms. Vining said, voter education is critical.
I agree. So when we're talking about who can register to vote, one of the things that I haven't heard since I was a child, that a judge can actually deem you mentally incompetent, and that will remove your voters' rights. That will remove your inability to vote as well. But I don't think that's as much an issue now, but it is something that maybe my grandmother, that aging population, is aware of, and they may be concerned about it. But if you do not have a judgment against you saying you cannot vote, and you have gone through the process and you've received that voter registration card, you can vote. They're not going to come looking for you because you may have taken some classes in school that provided you with additional support. That's not going to happen. So if everyone has a right to vote until otherwise stated. So don't sit home and think I don't need to go and vote. If you have not done, right, if you have not registered, the last day to register is generally the 5th Monday prior to the election. And this year, I believe it's in October, is October 5th is the last day for you to register. And so if you haven't registered, go ahead and go register, because right now, if we had only 100,000 people to vote in the presidential election earlier this year, we left about 60 to 70,000 votes in Houston County on the table.
Right.
60 to 70,000, depending on where you are. And that's a lot. And we can't, we can't not say that I don't want to vote because the lines are too long. I don't want to vote because I don't have a way. There are rides that are going to the polls now. There are people who are taking off work to go, and we're going to talk about some of that at the end of it. But to make sure you vote, you have to be registered in the county, in the state that you are living in. And I know that there are some challenges with, like, if you move within the county, you have 30 days to kind of get that together. All of those things have about 30 days. If you move outside of the county, you have 30 days to get that right. But if you move out within the county, you can still vote. Correct, Ms. Miller? If you're within the county, not outside of, but within that 30 days, you can vote in your established precinct.
You can, but the recommendation is that you change your address. And therefore, when you change your physical address, your mailing address, you get your license updated, then that should automatically sync with the Secretary of State's website and update your voter registration form and your voting address as well.
Correct. So, we just want to make sure that people understand that we want you to do it as soon as possible, and that there is a limitation to that as soon as possible, and that's 30 days.
That's correct.
30 days. Whether you're in the county, outside the county, or outside the state. 30
Absolutely.
days. Okay. What are some of the thoughts about getting the people that kind of information about just these little tidbits we're talking about when it comes to am I registered? We do have the voter registration page, which I know we're going to talk about later. We're going to show a picture of, and we do have the app, which you're going to talk about later as well. What are some other barriers that's taking place when it comes to people finding out whether or not they are registered to vote? Are they dependent on the precinct card? Because you don't always get a precinct card. So if they don't get that, are they thinking I can't go vote? And what do we tell them about that?
I try to direct everyone to the app, right? To try to, prior to the election, prior to election day, prior to early voting, to check the app. I also periodically receive the inactive voter rolls, and we do a lot of phone banking and text banking within the community to not only reach out to those individuals who may be subject to being purged, to let them know. And we changed the way that we ask people, are you registered to vote? We ask, when is the last time that you checked your voter registration status? Because it's less intrusive. It makes people feel a little bit more at ease. And, we can get away from vote shaming, where people, that's a personal issue for them. People may not want to vote in every election, but just reframing the narrative, and then again, pushing them to use that app and to check their status.
Yes.
Language is very important. Very important, because people can feel violated, or they can be made to feel shame and guilt about where they are with voting. And we don't understand their story. I heard you use the word narrative, but we don't know their story as to why they are there. So be patient and listen, and then you can give information that will yield fruit as opposed to not yielding fruit. What were you going to say, Mrs. Viney?
No, I was just agreeing with what you guys were saying. It's absolutely true.
So moving forward, I know there's some information. We have the app, we have those things, but we also have the, like you said, the local board of elections. They can go there and receive information as well, correct?
Yes, they can receive information. They can also receive a free voter ID. If you don't have the required documentation that you'll need to vote in person, then you can get a free voter ID from the Board of Elections office, in addition to, getting information in person on where to vote, and just a myriad of information in person there.
Yeah, and I think don't realize that you can actually get that free ID, because I have heard some people say, I don't have an ID card, I don't have a photo ID, but a lot of people don't realize that you can go and get a free ID in the state of Georgia. There goes your photo ID that you need to go vote. So I like the fact that it seems like for all of the questions or all of the reasons people may have for not voting, that there seems to be answers now that yes, you can vote. There is no excuse, because you can do this, or you can do that. And I think the fact that we have more opportunities that we can offer, especially our people, that's a good thing, because now there is no excuse for not voting. There's absolutely no excuse.
Well, while you're speaking in that vein, Mrs. Bynum, tell us about those ways to vote in Georgia. Give us some insight as to how we can vote. What does that look like for people who may not have the right answer for that question that we pose so eloquently?
Okay, so a couple of ways that you can vote in Georgia. Of course, you can vote in person, which means that you would actually go to the polls on the day of the election and vote. But I also read where Georgia is also considering a drive-through voting, which I really hadn't heard that until I started doing this research. So I think that's good, especially with COVID-19. A drive-through, we have drive-through everything else. So drive-through voting seems like it'd be the right thing to do also. And then the other way is absentee. That's either by mail, or you can do early voting, or you also can vote online. So those are the ways that we have. I think Ms. Miller mentioned earlier, if you do in-person voting, you have to have a photo ID. And like Ms. Miller said earlier, if you do not have a photo ID, and some of those IDs that they look for is like a valid driver's license, it can even be expired. I didn't know that, but your driver's license can be expired. A U.S. military ID, a passport, a military ID. And if you don't have any of those things, then you can go to the state of Georgia does issue a free ID that you can use to go when you get ready to vote. But you have to have some form of identification if you go in person to the poll to vote. You have to have one of those things. And then, of course, we did, again, I want to make sure, because I don't think I said where you can go to get your state of Georgia ID, but you can go to any county registrar's office or the Department of Driver Services office to actually get that ID. Now, once you go there, you do have to have some form of identification still to get that free ID. And so they're looking for something with your full legal name on it. They're looking for your date of birth. They're looking for documentation that has your name and your address. And they're also looking to see that you're a registered voter. So you can't just show up there and say, hey, I want an ID. You still have to have some things in your hand to prove that you are who you say you are and that you're a registered voter. So
now, when you go to the Department of Driver Services and the other, you're expected to pay a fee for that ID.
Not at the driver services. According to the research, you can go to the county registrar's office or the Department of Driver Services, and you will get an ID issued to you, and it will be free of charge.
Okay, that's new.
Yes.
Because I know someone who went a year or so ago, and they were fussing about having to have paid $15 for an ID. So that's new. That's good information. That's why this is an important conversation.
Exactly. And that's why I was saying, we really don't have an excuse, because I can't say I don't have $15, because guess what? It's free. So.
Okay. Are there any requirements that go with that so that it can be free, or that we are aware of?
No, the only requirement that we found as we were doing the research was the identification you will need once you get there, which is your full legal name, something with your name on it and your address, and to be a registered voter.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's good news. That's a hand clap, because that was a barrier when you think about it. It was a barrier. Paying $15. I know,
right?
Yeah. So with that understanding, you mentioned previously about the absentee voting, and then I heard you list like 3 different things. And I was like, wait a minute. When I think about absentee voting, I don't think about early voting being absentee voting. So again, we were talking about language and establishing an understanding in our community. And I didn't want to interrupt you, but I did want to go back to it, because I think it'll lend itself to what Mrs. Miller is about to talk about with absentee voting in Georgia. We have to understand what we are talking about in order for us to be able to do what's necessary. So when we say absentee voting, early voting is an example of absentee voting, just like sending in a ballot. So either of those ways can be deemed as absentee ballot. So tell us about the absentee voting in Georgia, Mrs. Miller.
As we talked about earlier, all voters are eligible for mail-in ballots in Georgia. You can request that by phone or by fax now. You can do it in person at the Board of Elections office in Perry. It's a short form. The Center for Voter Participation recently sent out pre-filled applications for absentee ballots for most voters who participated in the primary. And they included a prepaid postage stamp as well. So if you received that, it was a legitimate form, and all you would have to do is to sign it, date it, and drop it back in the mail. Again, there's no excuse required to vote absentee before Election Day, but your ballots have to be requested. They can be requested up to 180 days prior to the election. When we're speaking about vote by mails, we ask individuals to print legibly, to make sure that you use blue or black ink. If it's a primary, you're making sure that you list the date of the election. We spoke earlier about selecting party affiliations if it's a primary, but for a general election, you do not have to do that. Again, printing legibly, making sure that you read the form carefully, 2-digit month, 2-digit date, 4-digit year, and then signing that form and returning it to the local county Board of Elections.
Ms. Miller.
Yes.
Let's talk about 2 things very quickly that you just mentioned. Can you tell the viewers the difference between a general election and a primary election? Because if we're telling them that they don't have to put a party for one, but they do for the other, let's give them some examples of what that looks like.
So your primary elections typically happen early spring, in the beginning of the year. Those are the elections where you're choosing which candidate that you want to represent you on the general election ballot. So for instance, you may have 5 Democrats who are running for office, and you may have 4 Republicans who are running for office. And all of those Democrats will be on a ballot, on the Democratic ballot, and you'll select the top Democrat that you want to represent you on the November election. And the same for your Republican candidates. The same for nonpartisan races, like our school board races are nonpartisan. And independent candidates, they have a completely different process in which they're selected in timeline in order to be listed on the ballot for the general election. So that's the difference between your primary and general elections.
Thank you. I know somebody is saying, I didn't know that. And what I say to that is, that's why we're having this important conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The deadline to request your absentee application is Friday, October 30th. Your ballot application must be received by the county election office by 5 o'clock on the Friday before the election. And again, you can mail that, you can fax it, you can drop it off in person, or you can even email it. But what we recommend is that you do not wait until the last minute to request your vote by mail or your ballot, because anything can happen between the Friday before election and on a Tuesday. You know, we get bombarded. The local boards of elections office can get bombarded, and that can delay you receiving your ballot.
Absolutely. And so with that understanding, with the absentee voting, we understand general and primary, we know where to go and what to do. What would be next? What would be that thing that says to a person who has a voter registration, they're not sure if it's ready? How do we get them armed with the mobility to now act? What do we need to do?
One of the things that we try to encourage, one is constant engagement, and the issue mining is really important. A lot of times no one is speaking to voters, and so you have areas or precincts where you have a large number of eligible voters, but they are not voting over 50% in those particular precincts. So we spend a lot of times, like I said, on the phone talking about issues and not candidates. And then always telling people, or reminding them rather, that even if you're not into politics, politics is into you. It's in everything that you do. I know we may be on the phone from the rooter to the tutor. We've heard that, all the time. And so from the time that you're born, an elected official signs your birth certificate. And when you die, an elected official signs your death certificate. So we have to break it down where voters can understand what the issues are, how it directly affects them, and then help them to understand that they do have power in their vote. Voting is how we build power. It's the only leverage that we have in order to build the power that we need to transform our communities.
Yes.
What do you think, Ms. Mailin?
I think that, for every excuse someone would want to give to not vote, we need to have something to say of why they should or how they could. I agree with everything that Ms. Miller said. Something that I failed to mention earlier is that Georgia the state election board has even considered an online absentee vote, which means you can actually go online. There's a portal that's going to be there. And it started on August the 10th is when it got approved, but you can actually go online and vote. So now you're talking about not just voting, going to the polls, not just maybe having drive-through, not just absentee by mail, not just absentee early voting, but now there's going to be a portal online where you also can vote. So I just think that we need to be prepared for every excuse that anyone can come up with, but while they can't vote, we need to be armed with the knowledge to tell them, yes, you can, and this is how you can do it.
I think with the portal that they did on the 10th was part of getting ready for that process, but it was primarily intended to get people to submit an online request for absentee ballot application. So we're going to get there with what you're saying. Absolutely. And they started on the 10th by getting perhaps people acclimated to an online process, but that particular process is so that they can complete their application to receive a ballot, an absentee ballot. So I think that's a great move, though, because you're still talking about mobility. You're still talking about, I have to expose myself, or I have to catch a ride, or I don't have money to pay somebody. So you're still removing barriers, especially in your marginalized communities. And I'll even go a little bit farther and say your traumatized communities. And so that's a great step. Thank you for bringing that up as to how on that date they start the online process for requesting your absentee ballot, which is a definite sign that we will be able to do some more online activities as it relates to voting in the very near future. Yes. Good point. Good point. So I heard both of you talk about getting the way to get them motivated to action is by arming them with information. And so what I want to ask you now is, where do we go to give them this information? They're not going to come to us. They're not, and churches can only do so much because they may mess up their status, and then some of the people who we're talking about aren't necessarily sitting up in church. But how do we get this information to them? We're doing this event, we're going to publish it, and we're going to put it out there for the community to have, but we still have to get them to listen to it and listen to it in its entirety. And we know that language is important. So not only what we say, how we say it, and where we place the information is important. What are your thoughts on some ways to kind of start decreasing the number of people who are not ready to do what their voice and their power says they can do?
So I'll take a stab at that. Again, I think it's 365-day engagement. I think that we have to, I love forums and, online and making knowledge more accessible. Everyone pretty much has a smartphone. But I think we also have to go a step further, and we have to actually go to communities and engage our community and engage voters. We have to do more door to door. We have to start picking up the phone. And I know we are in an age of COVID. So the way that we do those things, the way that we interact with voters directly has changed. Slate cards, developing slate cards that profile the candidates and the positions that they espouse to, right? And distribute those mass to the community. We're doing door hangers this season, and giving our voters information about how they can vote by mail, and then also to support candidates who support the issues that we care about in the community. So making sure that we go to voters and have those conversations with them where they're comfortable, not necessarily having the expectation that they come to us all the time to get information.
Exactly.
Thank you. What were your thoughts, Mrs. Viner?
I agree with what Ms. Miller said. Social media is great because I'm encouraging as many people as I can to use their social media profile to encourage other people to vote. But relationships is way more important than the social media. And so even though we have COVID-19 going on, we still have to find ways to get to the people, to get to the community. Correct. To the communities that are finding reasons not to go vote, who feel like it's not going to matter, who feel hopeless. And we have to find a way to connect with them before November gets here. We have to find a way to connect with them throughout the entire year, because it's not just the presidential election that's important. Our city council elections are important. Our state rep elections are important. And so we have to find a way to connect with people, not just for this election, but we have to connect and build relationships so that no matter what the election is, no matter what we're voting for, they will go out and vote. But it's about relationships. It's about relationships.
And they have to trust. Oh, I'm sorry. And they have to trust us as well, right? They have to trust us to deliver accurate information. We're in an age where people are working multiple jobs. They don't, and then we have an aging population who may or may not be on social media. And then we also have a population that has paid data. And so they're not going to spend a lot of time on social media on things that drain their data. So yeah, making sure that they trust us with the message and trust us to deliver the information for them. The relationship building and network engagement are critical.
So those are some very valuable pieces of information that anyone who's listening to this can take and create their own movement. It doesn't have to be our movement. It just needs to be a movement that goes towards a goal. And so with that understanding that people need connection, people need to establish relationship, most importantly, need to trust you. And so when we get those things in place, the trust and the relationship, it's important to have the right message. Can the two of you speak about the issues, just a few of the issues that we need to be aware of as we start talking about what supports our vote for a particular person or ideal? What are some things that we need to have? I heard the word ask. What does our ask need to be when we see someone who's currently in office and those who want our vote to get in office? Can you give me about 2 or 3 each?
Well, for me, it has to be the racial issues. I mean, we have been struggling so long with trying to make a difference in our world. And when I think about all of the racial injustices that happen, not just the ones that we see on TV, but the ones that I've experienced on my job, the ones that people I know have experienced, when I see those type of things, we need people in office who are going to be for everyone and who's going to take a stand on the right thing to do, regardless of their party, regardless of their friends. And I guess the biggest issue I see now, it's the party thing. To me, right is right and wrong is wrong. And so I want someone in office who is going to stand by that same thing. Right is right and wrong is wrong. Not standing on a platform because they're Republican, not standing on it because they're a Democrat, but standing on it because it's the right thing to do. And the way things are right now, we need something. We need someone to, more than just one person, to hurry up and get in office so that we can fix what's going on, because we're broke. Our nation, and I'm physically broke. We are broke as a nation, and it takes every part of government to fix it. It's not up to the president. It's up to our local government, our state government. It's going to take all of us to fix it, but we can't fix it if we don't put the right people in office, and we can't put the right people in office if we don't know what they stand for. And we also can't know what they stand for if we don't put it out there so people can get it, whether that's media, whether that's leaving a paper on their at their house, whatever avenue we need. Is critical. It's so crucial right now. It's so critical that we get out and vote so that we can save our nation, because right now it's broke.
Okay. So I hear you say some race. Whatever I ask is, what are you going to do about the race issues? Is that one of the asks?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. What are we going to do about race issues? All right. What do you think, Mrs. Miller?
One of the top priorities for me is health, the health disparities, and the impact of education, the state of education. COVID has really highlighted the disparities and the shortcomings of our education system when it comes to how we deliver to our children, right? Where resources are allocated, and how local school systems, our state leaders support education for our children, and how we allocate resources to make sure that they get what they need. And then the other are health disparities. If we're not healthy, we are not productive in the economy. If we're not healthy, we're not productive when we're sitting in school. If our families, if our mothers or fathers are not healthy, then our students are also not going to be focused on their education system. I think in addition to the racial issues, accountability, affordable housing, but healthcare and education and policy prescriptives to really address and to strengthen those systems are of utmost concern to me.
So the things that you all mentioned, I agree, are very important. Especially, I'll start with Mrs. Biden and give my thoughts on when it comes to the race. There are a couple of acts or bills that are out, they're not bills, acts that are out there that we're looking to get some traction on, like the John Lewis, the act that he has out there, the policing. There are like 5 major ones. Of course, we still have the Health Cares Act that's sitting out there waiting, about to be chopped. We also have, and with that comes into play what you were talking about, Ms. Miller, and with the policing and the John Lewis Act to include the Voters' Right Act. We have a lot of acts when it comes to us. We need laws.
Mm-hmm.
So my ask would be, take me from a 1-act screenplay and put me over here to where I'm written in history as something that is substantial. Do you? Because right now I'm caught in the middle with all of these acts, which means that as they expire or as they go back and vote for whatever reason, I can no longer exist as I am in my own agency, as my own person, as a person who's a part of this race. So one of my asks would be, including what you all are saying, is to let's change some acts to some laws. Let's get some stability with some of these things. And if you're not willing to do something differently with the policing, then make some other things mandatory, because we're having senseless killings of Black and brown people, and they're not old. We just had a recent shooting of someone who was 13 years old who was autistic. And so that we need to do some better jobs of accountability. That's an ask for me. I need accountability for educational purposes. I need accountability for when you do certain things, that certain things will happen no matter who you are. Because, they'll go after some of the Black people who did wrong. Look at a neighboring county. I almost call that county's name, but look at a neighboring county who there was, someone who got caught up in some actions and they immediately dismissed that person. But we don't have that immediacy everywhere. And I think it's because of the population, the demographics. I could be wrong. I have not done any research on it, but I think it's dealing with demographics. When you look at the demographic of a certain area, and then you look at those who have some position and power and authority, because those are 3 different things. And we need to understand that. Position, power, and authority, wholly different. But they also understand that in order to get in, you need a certain percentage Black and brown vote. So I'm going to be accountable to you because it benefits me. No, ma'am, no, sir. I need accountability across the board. And so one of the things that I want to ask the people in my community that look like me is, let's demand the accountability. Let's no longer sit in the comfort of our own homes and say, well, that's awful. That's downright. Because I was watching a young man yesterday, and I can't recall his name, but he said something very pungent to me in his video. He said, we don't get involved, just like with the Floyd situation. Everybody had their camera phones out and they just video. And when Mrs. Miller say, well, Tanya, you go over there and say something to them. What I tell her is, I don't know that dude. I don't know that dude, but I got him right here. I'm gonna make sure I upload this and I get it out. But I don't know that dude. I can't be getting involved. They're gonna put me. No. John Lewis said, get in some trouble, some good trouble, some necessary trouble. That's necessary trouble. Because I had this conversation with my 30-year-old son, and I told him, I said, I think I would have used my therapeutic prowess to engage in that situation. I would have appeased or appealed to that person who had his knee on that Black man's neck and said, is this really how we want this to end? When you think about your life, what is it that you want to be known? Now, somebody may say, well, you dealing with him. No. Sometimes you got to dance with the devil just to get on the floor. And we need to understand that. So when we're talking about our ask, I will get off on a diatribe because I'm really passionate about our Black males. and the things that are happening to them, but I don't want to come across as being biased because, as I said earlier in another session, this is a humanity issue. This is a human issue. As much as we see the negativity being enforced upon Black and Brown, until we realize that it's a human issue, until we get from up under the old Jim Crow, until we get from up under the slavery dynamics of us not being of us being property and not being human, we're going to continue to have these challenges. We've got to become human in somebody's eye in order for some of this stuff to stop. So that's an ask for me. I'm gonna go back to ain't I a woman? You know what I mean? Can't you open the door for me? Can't you lay down your coat for me? Ain't I a woman? So I need for our people who are viewing this to feel empowered and to understand that your voice matters.
Yes.
It matters.
Yes.
Keep saying stuff. Keep getting involved. Keep getting engaged. And after a while, your courage and your bravery is going to allow other people, because you start making noise. What people do, they start coming out the house. They start looking, and we want people to come out of the house. We want people to realize that this is an important conversation, and it's a conversation that needs to be had with our family, with our children, and not just about the negative components to it, but empowering their voice so that they can have an ask when they meet somebody. They can say, you know what? At my school on this side of town, I don't have the same thing that school has. And when they say, how do you know? So, well, we got a TV in our school and it loops and it shows all the other schools and what they're doing. And so I get to see. Use your senses and it will encourage your voice. I will ask one last question as we're kind of trying to move, because it's so much. Maybe we can come back and do this again. But one of the things that was said was when you all were talking about the text bank. I know that the WRAC is in position. We've had 2 trainings that we are partnering with some other agencies to do test banks so that we can get this information out. And we know that that is not the epitome, but we do know that a little bit goes a long way. And so we want to make sure, we want people to know to look out for that in our area. Look out for that down in Cochran and Bleckley for some texts to come out to ask you, do you need some support with registering? Are you registered to vote? How can we help you to get that information? Don't discard it. And don't say, what is this? And then hit delete. It's our way of reaching out to you, giving you a warm support line. And another thing I want to say is when we're talking about different votes, I have a note here that says some examples of the issues and how our vote matters. You all mentioned city council. You all mentioned school boards. You all mentioned just not just the big, like the senators, because we have several races that are coming up. We have a DA race. We have a superior clerk. Help me out.
City clerk.
Yes.
Right. And
we have district attorney, superior court clerk. We have state senate, which covers three county region. We have a state house race, and we also have another state senate race on the north end of the county. So we have 3 countywide races that are going on right now, in addition to some.
We have a county commissioner. We have a county commissioner race.
Yes, and this is the first time in probably over a decade that we've had 3 top-notch Black candidates fielding countywide positions, and we haven't had unelected African American to countywide positions since Mr. Houston Porter, countywide, and that was in the 1980s. So this is an opportunity for us to not only engage with those candidates, learn where they stand on the issues, and get some accountability.
Absolutely. And so we want to encourage them. Mrs. Viner, what would you say? I know that you're kind of used to addressing some people in large settings. So what would you say to them about gaining this information about all of these races? How would you suggest that they go about getting in the know?
And we're talking about the political races?
Yes, ma'am. Just finding information out for your local area, because as Mrs. Miller said, we have some very important ones. We have a DA, we have a superior clerk, we have a county commissioner, we have senator, we have just, I think it's like 4 or 5 major and humongous opportunities for some representation to get into play. So, and they may not even know any of this. They may not even know where to go find any of this information about these persons.
Well, I would start by telling them, go online, because online you can pull up the people that are running for the races and the different things that they stand for. But another thing that I think that I've heard that some other organizations are going to be doing, they're going to have forums just like we're having right now. And in those forums, they're going to have the different candidates that hopefully will be on there that people will be able to ask them questions, not just the panel members, but people online will be able to ask questions. And that's how you can also find out what candidates are about. It's not just about them getting up there and saying, I am Diana Vining, I'm running for this office, blah, blah, blah. But you will be able to ask them questions that are specific to your neighborhood, specific to you, and you can find out exactly what they stand for. So other than online, I think those forums that we could have, just like we're having right now, are going to be great opportunities for people to really learn and understand what candidates are about. Another thing I would do if I was a candidate, put stuff in people's mailboxes. I mean, put stuff on people's door so they can really understand what I'm about, and not just my generic views on what I plan on doing, but be specific. We know the questions. Most politicians know the questions that people have. Put those questions on a sheet of paper and put those answers down and be specific about the things that you plan on doing to make my community better. And then pass that type of information out. Because we can't go to the auditorium and sit and listen like we normally would, we have to start thinking outside of the box and use those type of ways to make sure that we get all the information out to everyone so we can be knowledgeable. Again, we want everybody to vote, but we want you to vote and be educated on who you're voting for.
What are your thoughts, Ms. Miller?
I 100% agree. The only caveat that I would suggest is that it is so expensive to do mailers for candidates, and for particularly when it comes to Black women who are on the ballot, it is always typically a lot more challenging for them to raise a substantial amount of campaign dollars. So they need more boots on the ground and more support in order to get the word out and mail out. But that's a side issue, but absolutely. We need to look at slate cards. They need to do door hangers. They need to put literature in the hands of people, pop up, have visibility so people will know who's running. I received so many calls, after we did our voter registration caravan, people didn't know who's running here, in Houston County. And this election season, again, is so unlike any that we've been in before, because people are not doing boots on the ground in the same manner, right? There's very low visibility around the election. And so we have to just do a better job of getting the word out so people know, yes, we do have a choice. We can make change, and we can withhold our vote, or we can extend our vote to those candidates who are going to support the issues that we are concerned about.
Very good. Thank you, ladies. This has been a very robust and rich conversation. So much value in it and so much love. There's passion in each of our voices as we seek to find a better space for our communities and for those who are in our communities. You said something earlier about slate cards and how people can find out about who's running. And I'm trying to remember my mind. Did we actually talk about the My Voter page, which is where they can go and check their status, and they can actually register to vote on that page, and they can see a ballot of those persons that are running on that page. So it's My Voter page. It's mvp.sos.ga.gov. And I know we sound in rush now because we're kind of at a time limit. But ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, everyone, please go and check your My Voter page. It tells you everything you need to know. And Ms. Miller, I think there's an app
Yes, there's a Georgia Leads app. You can download that directly from the Secretary of State's website. It will take you back to the MVP, the My Voter page, but there's some additional information through the app that you'll have access to. So I just keep Georgia Leads on my cell phone and on my iPads, so wherever I go. And then the other thing I would say really quickly, check your status before Election Day, because so many people get turned around. You think that your early voting location is the same as your Election Day precinct, and it is not always the case. So check your status before you go.
Awesome. And I'm going to give you all any closing remarks for about a few seconds, if you have any, and then we're going to wish our constituents, because that's what they are to us in this hour, our constituents, a well-timed. Any closing remarks?
Well, I would just like to say to everyone, no matter if you vote in person, absentee, however you do it, do it. Do not be discouraged by long lines. If you happen to go do it in person, do not be discouraged by the internet not acting correctly. Don't be discouraged. Please, please, please go vote, because every vote counts. Every vote counts.
Yep. And my final words would be, if we overwhelm the system, there's no way that the system can be undermined. So just make sure that we vote in numbers that we need, and build power in the way that we need to in order to transform our communities and have a good quality of life for our families and neighbors.
Absolutely. And if you want to be a part of this process, more than just casting a vote, please reach out, and you may be able to become a national poll worker. You may be able to get in there and see it from the inside out, and that will give you a lived experience, one that will empower you to do some great things. This is not an event that's in isolation. This is an event to where we spread the word, we spread the news. We don't want to be like Texas. We don't want to be like Texas. And so with that being said, thank you for joining WRAC Talks, where there's always an important conversation to be had.
Enough electoral votes, more than 270, more than enough to become the 44th President of the United States. He will be the first African-American President of the United States.
I've been broke all my life, but I kept hope all them nights. You see business in my city? Yeah, they closed all them twice. I was just riding down Salem, all them damn potholes I can't drive. I know y'all can fix it faster, but I know y'all won't try. Don't nobody care about us, and that's wrong vote. Voted for Obama back in 2012, I remember that's when I had hope. He was saying, yes, we can, and everybody got less food stamps. And when I turned 21, I was still broke, I'd never vote again. I don't think I ever had a president make my life better. Did it all on my own, ain't no politician ever do a nice gesture. I don't even know the mayor's name, I ain't never seen her one time ever. Tell me how she gonna help the city. What I'm supposed to do, write letters? What I'm supposed to do, blame Trump? He ain't never really gave a ain't nobody raised minimum wage. None of these jobs pay enough. I think they just wanna keep us broke, cause they ain't putting none in place for us. This how all my people feel, but we gotta learn. We complained enough, let me change it up. Everything I just said, everybody I know think the same way. See, they don't wanna see us vote, and we never do, so we see the same thing. But all our votes really do count, and they'll never really let it show. So now I'm finna break it down, cause if I don't, you would probably never know. First thing first, you know back in middle school when they taught us, it was 3 branches of the government. We forgot it when we got older. It's the judicial, the legislative, and executive. But all we know is the executive. That's the mayor or the governor and the president. Now none of them 3 people make no laws, they just be checking them. The laws come to their desk and all they do is say no or yes to it. So when the news station tried to tell us that Barack Obama couldn't put us on, we was all salty at Obama when it was the Congress members all along. We gotta focus on the legislative branch, yeah, they the ones that make the laws. Yeah, they the ones write how much food stamp money you get on the card. But when people that wanted to help us wanted the job, I know they probably lost. Cause we ain't even know their name, we ain't know their face, we ain't know it all. So the Congress or the State House, that's legislative, they make laws. So what we want from the president is what they do, okay y'all? See, they election every 2 years, but we don't ever even go to those. The Congress, they can raise minimum wage, but we ain't even really know it though. So you know how back in 08, when we all voted for Obama, We was all supposed to go back in 2010 and vote for the Congress. Cause they the ones make child support laws. They the ones choose if your kids at school get to eat steak or corn dogs. The state house make the court costs. So if the country failed, then you can't say it's them, it's your fault. Cause y'all ain't know to vote for Congress members that was for y'all. And they don't gotta leave after 4 years, and we just let them sit. See, they don't wanna tell you this, they want you to focus on the president. Now the third branch is the judicial, that's judges. They the reason why John Crawford and Trayvon ain't had justice. So when Meek Mill got locked up just for popping willies, we blame the judge and not the city when they let her get voted in. Cause they ain't know who to vote against. Imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back. Grocery store food better, custody of your kids back. Homeless people get new shelters. If we gon' fix the U.S., we gotta start with them 2 letters, me and you. Somebody told us that the government wanna keep us broke, but the only reason why those people in the government is cause we ain't vote. And I ain't talking about the president, I'm talking about the ones we ain't know. See, they was gonna try to keep it low, but it's gonna hurt them when they see the pros.
Every time you stay home, someone is making a decision about you, making decisions about the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food your kids eat, and how much money you bring home every 2 weeks. So every time you sit out an election, every time you don't show up because you think it doesn't matter, someone else is happy that you didn't show up, so they can make that decision for you. Vote.